So there's an election tomorrow, I guess. And I have a lot of opinions about the election. Um, just a lot to say, I think. And like I've been wanting to get a proper video out about a lot of stuff associated with it. Um, but it really hasn't been in the cards. It's just been an absolute mess of a month. This month I've had like 2 weeks where my job hasn't basically drained all of my energy. So I'm just now getting to a point where like I'm somewhat able to like both have energy and also not fixate on some other unrelated thing. So unfortunately, I can't really, make the whole thing tonight. So, I considered just dropping it. I considered trying to retrofit it or something. And I might still do something like that. But for the time being, I think I'm kind of just going to try and ad lib something just because I really want to have something out before, the election happens and we all have to kind of deal with that. Because, I mean, hell, if I write anything right now, it's just going to be utterly irrelevant tomorrow. There's just a lot of problems that I would like to talk about. So I'm just gonna run through some of the stuff I have written down now, and I'm gonna ramble for a little bit, and I'm gonna try and cut it down to be like not too long. So hopefully that's something you can enjoy. If you don't, it's fine. I just feel the need to like get out something about the election before it happens, and hopefully following the election things will be okay, and hopefully I can still just kind of go back to and do some other stuff that isn't about the election that I have more immediate interest in. But for the time being, let's talk about it. So the thing I was trying to do with this article, it's about the Electoral College at first. Because originally I wanted to make this whole article about the Electoral College and why it sucks, because it does, and I'll get into that later. But for a few reasons, it just kind of didn't. I never got around to it. I had other stuff that bothered me more that I wanted to make videos about, and I had other priorities, that kind of thing. So it kind of like waited until about the past month, and as a result of that, it's just been, I don't know. It's just over the past month, I mentioned this in the Q&A video. I was thinking like I'm going to make a video about the Electoral College, and then I'm like, why? Why am I making a video about the Electoral College? Like why is that the priority right now? And so basically I decided what I was going to do was I was going to start talking about that. And hello Ziva. You want to say hi? Do you want to say hi, Ziva? Here. This is Ziva. She's a lovely kitty, and she is in my room, which I didn't know until now. So I'm going to let her out. Okay, so anyway, Electoral College. Basically, I wanted to do a whole thing where it starts about the Electoral College and I can get out the like various bugs I have up my ass about that. And then I could just be like, kind of make the same point, be like, wait, what am I talking about? And talk about other stuff too. But it was having a lot of trouble coming together in general. Like I basically started the video with just like a whole pseudo angry rant about like how it was going to be kind of weird and slapdash. It still will if I end up finishing it, but we're just going to have to see what happens there. Either way, I'll just read off the intro. How about that? Because that was something I was going to do. Let's just get this over with. I don't need to introduce you to the American election, the stakes, the people, the anything. If you're reading this article, you already know. You've already been hearing about it nonstop for at least the past 2 years. You're probably unbearably sick of thinking about it, especially if you live outside the United States and get subjected to the constant one-way news feed this country thrusts upon the world. I'm not even sure what I'm doing here, but whatever it is, it feels like something I need to do. It's entirely possible this will feel more erratic and disorienting than my other articles. I have a lot to say, I think. This article is going to be a bin for me to dump all of it in, and I can only hope I reach some kind of point by the end. I suppose it's wishful thinking to expect whatever I'm attempting here to come out making some kind of nice, clean point, but if nothing else, the exercise might resonate with some people. Only one way to find out. It's a thing. I was going back and forth on changing it. Really, this article was just having a lot of trouble forming, and that made it hard for me to actually get myself to work on it. And the actual part about the Electoral College was a big barrier because while that has been a special interest for me in the past, I couldn't get as interested in it anymore because it just wasn't really actually the point of the video. And I was increasingly unsure if I should even bother with it in the video. But then it felt like it was kind of an important part of the point. So I'll go ahead and just read that out. The 2016 election of Donald Trump to the American presidency led to an intensification of all pre-existing political tensions throughout the country. Whether this ended up being a good or bad thing is difficult to say, but it certainly meant a lot of issues starving for attention had eyes on them for the first time in a while. The continual suffering of the working class in the global south under world capitalism was among them, as was the bizarre electoral college system that allowed Trump to become the second consecutive Republican to enter office in spite of the popular vote. So there was this point here where I was going to kind of let it pass by in a perspective video where it would be I said this whole thing about the continual suffering of the working class in the global south and then just kind of glaze past that to talk about the electoral the point was that would be kind of something that I revisit later. I kind of got to the part where I revisit it, but it's I wrote a fairly long thread on the common arguments surrounding the Electoral College and its problems about a year ago, and I've been meaning to expand on it ever since, so I suppose this is a good place to do it. And I linked this old thread. I basically just ran a bunch of numbers in Excel because I was really interested in the statistics element of how there's some of the arguments about the Electoral College work. Yeah, I made a bunch of arguments in that thread. I made arguments about I think I kind of go into all of them in the rest of the article, so I'll just, read it. You can read the thread on my Twitter if you fucking search Electoral College by me. So there's this idea that whenever the Electoral College contradicts the popular vote, it's because the founders designed some kind of magical system to prevent mob rule and automatically overrule what people want in order to protect the little guy or something. Images like what I cited in the thread claim that if presidents were elected by popular vote, only small portions of the country would have any power in government, leaving entire ways of life, usually rural ones in this context, basically unrepresented. Claims like these frustrate the hell out of me, and I need to explain why. The American presidential elections, I said in American presidential elections. That's interesting. That's a daring linguistic choice. In American presidential elections, each state is given a total number of votes equal to the number of representatives it has in Congress. States get a population-based number of representatives in the House and exactly 2 each in the Senate, so the number of electoral votes a state has is slightly greater per capita in smaller states. Because of this, rural states have a real voice in presidential elections and can stick it to the coastal elites by forcing in a candidate like Donald Trump. Or they could if that was how this worked. Anyone with a passing knowledge of American elections should be able to observe that states like Wyoming basically never had any sway on any election because the population is still incredibly small relative to other states. Candidates don't campaign all over the country. They campaign in the 6 or so states with a lot of votes and a decent chance of going either way. This is because almost every state gives every single one of its votes to whoever wins a plurality of that state's popular vote. That is, if one candidate gets 48.3% of the vote in a huge state like Florida, while their opponent gets 48.2%, the former candidate gets every single vote in that state. The problems don't start. God. Yeah, I always have little blunders when I'm recording these, I'm just going to leave them in. It's charming, I guess. The problems don't start there, though. Wow, that's the opposite. The problems don't stop there, though. The small state bias is not only utterly ineffective at accomplishing anything interesting, it also feeds into a broader history of American racism. Because the Electoral College favors states with lower populations, any demographic of people who are more likely to live in rural areas statistically has more voting power than people who don't. I used Excel to find the relative power a vote has for various demographics based on census data and found that on average white people have more voting power than black, Asian, or Hispanic people. It's easy to write that off as a coincidence if you don't consider little things like how the Homestead Act gave a huge amount of rural land stolen from indigenous people near exclusively to white people, or also slavery was a thing. This bias isn't particularly meaningful in any material sense. Indigenous people technically have the most powerful votes by this logic, but, there's not as many, and it's obviously there's kind of different dynamics there with indigenous people and voting. It feels worth at least thinking about, considering that the idea of protecting rural interests is one of the most common arguments for the Electoral College. There's definitely a real sense in which this is a dog whistle, because, smaller states are more rural states, and rural states have a higher proportion of white people in them. And to white people living in Wyoming or whatever the fuck, it sounds really great to say, no, we're going to protect the interests of me and people like me, and not the interests of those people in the cities, those people. It's it's not fucking, it's dog whistles. It's I don't need to fucking explain the entire concept. You get it. Even on top of that, the Electoral College helps to completely stamp out third parties in America by requiring any prospective party to get a plurality in at least one state before a single vote cast for them counts in the slightest. If any third party were to ever get big enough to actually take a significant amount of votes, it would hardly matter anyway, because if no candidate gets a majority in the Electoral College, the entire decision gets left to a runoff election between the top three candidates in the House of Representatives of all places. And that runoff only allows one vote per state. And you only need one representative each from 2/3 of the states for the vote to count. This is a thing. This is a real thing in the American Constitution. If any presidential election were to ever not produce a majority, the House decides it. But the House decides it in a weird lopsided way where feasibly you could just block people from getting in and fucking steal the election if you wanted to. It's a whole thing. Kind of weird. It seems really weird to me that there's such a low quorum for the fucking presidential election. It seems like that should be one of the few things where it's okay, but almost everyone needs to be here. And I don't know why anyone would not go there. Why would a third of the House just be I can't be fucked. I gotta go see my kid's soccer game. I don't know, it's just kind of weird. Needless to say, when I looked over the results of all the elections where the popular vote didn't agree with the winning candidate, I found it hardly represented some kind of balancing force in favor of the poor, oppressed white landowners in Kentucky. Hillary Clinton lost in 2016 because of her failure to present a strong vision or vaguely leftist platform to workers in the Rust Belt, which lost her Pennsylvania. Al Gore lost because Jeb Bush managed to disenfranchise just enough black people in Florida to give George a lead of 537 votes, thereby granting him all 25 of the electors. And Benjamin Harrison won in 1888 with corruption in New York. Rutherford B. Hayes won in 1876 because of the whole fucking compromise of 1876, where basically there was dispute over the election results between a Republican and a Democrat right after the Civil War, and then they struck a deal where the Republicans agreed to end segregation, or I have that backwards. The Republicans agreed to end Reconstruction, is what I meant to say. And in exchange, the Democrats had to pinky promise to be very nice to people in the South and also make Rutherford B. Hayes president. And as we all know, Rutherford B. Hayes was a famous champion of all of the progressive values of history. So it was really turned out to be worth it in the end. Then there was the whole thing with John Quincy Adams, where that was I think the only time the vote's ever gone to the House, because there were 4 viable candidates in that election, and the House election only allows 3 candidates, so one of them was just knocked out, and all the people who liked that one also liked John Quincy Adams, so that was what happened. The Electoral College is a system that does nothing but vaguely corrupt the popular vote for no particular reason other than that it seemed philosophically charming to some rich liberals 230 years ago. Indeed, the people who wrote the American Constitution had 2 big ideological accessions. Accessions? That's accessions. I feel like that's a word. I feel like that's a really obscure word. They could prevent any and all tyranny by pitting a bunch of perfectly balanced pieces of government against each other, and that they had to do this while making sure to never give common people too much power. They were all aristocrats, and the day-to-day experience of power and nobility makes you believe you know better than anyone else in the world. There's things we can do to change the system, like passing the national popular vote interstate compact, or at least adopting a more proportional system of elector distribution. The former might get struck down in court, though, and the latter might lead to elections being decided in the House. This system is incredibly hard to change because the founders also thought that changing anything about the Constitution should be unreasonably difficult to make sure people in the future really wanted to, and to make sure none of the commoners could mess up their perfect system too badly. And then I included this quote in this thread that I really liked when I was looking back at it, where I said, maybe it even seems a little bit like this whole representative democracy stuff is a sham, meant to get people mired in an endless sea of legal technicalities and vested interests instead of doing anything to directly improve the world around them. And then I continue and say, the founders wanted to make sure that there would be a significant institutional barrier between the people and any meaningful ability to change anything. It's important to see through all the bullshit so you don't find yourself rambling on endlessly about how many votes different states get, and listing a bunch of historical trivia about dead aristocrats. Do you see the thing I'm doing here? Imagine if you spent hours punching equations into an Excel spreadsheet in order to find an optimal distribution of elite voters to best represent the people, and you were mortified at the suppression of third parties as if they do any better. And if you just kept splitting hairs about that instead of actually helping the people, or you see the thing you get it. You get the thing that's happening here. That was the last part in there where I talk about fucking politics, like in the traditional sense, like fucking Florida has 25 electors, like. And the thing is that it's stuff I enjoy talking about. Like, that's the hard part, is that I like talking about that stuff, you know? And that was kind of what I was going to address here, how it's like, it's weird, right? Because the whole thing's a scam. Like, the entire thing is just basically made up to fucking give people an outlet for their justified outrage at fucking capitalism and hierarchy and shit. And so that they can have like an avenue that they put all of that outrage into that doesn't actually accomplish anything. Like, democracy accomplishes stuff. I mean, democracy is the good part. Republican democracy is a bit of a mess. It doesn't accomplish much. It accomplishes stuff, but fundamentally it's still premised on this idea that there's some people who are just better than everyone else, and we have to have some people who like know all of how the world works and can make all the laws so that other people don't have to, and like the founders have this like, I always wonder, I always go back on whether it's naivete or like basically just having a vested interest. I think it's probably a little of both, where like, you get taught in school like that the founders were like, like they had so many ideas about how like there wouldn't be they didn't have the idea of career politicians. Like, politicians were just people that everyone in the community liked, and like there wouldn't be political parties, there wouldn't be like, but like of course they were often just not focused on material stuff. They were just like, I don't like political parties, we're not going to do anything to like structurally make that the case, but I think they're bad. So like, it's just, yeah, it's kind of complicated though. They were also aristocrats. They also fundamentally didn't really want people like collectivizing their fucking property. They were liberals. That's what liberals do. So like, it's complicated. It's not like representative democracy is useless. It's like better than what used to exist before that, but it's still not great. And it has that power of like basically creating a constant controlled opposition. Because, the people who are against the current rulers are never going to do anything but fucking vote or whatever, So, yeah. Around that point, I switched into part 2, and I was like, I only got like one paragraph past this point. The night that I finally managed to actually write the Electoral College bit, I was really excited to keep going with it, and then it's only been a few days since then, and I really just haven't been able to get around to it, and I wouldn't have been able to finish the video anyway. So I'm happy I'm trying to at least put something up. Anyway, so yeah, now the rest of this will probably go by a lot faster because I don't actually have anything to directly read, except for this one paragraph. So I say, part 2, what the hell am I even doing? And I say, no, seriously, why is this what I'm talking about right now? How did I just glaze over the worldwide suffering earlier in favor of talking about fucking electors? See, that's where it called back to it. We're in the middle of a pandemic of incredible severity. The constant and open crimes against humanity of the American state, among others, are being exposed even more blatantly than usual. Serious full-on fascism is encroaching around the world. Civil war is brewing. The planet is on fire. And I'm here going on about Florida, and it's 25 electors. Why? It would not have been as giggly in the video, obviously, but yeah. So this is the part where I kind of talk about, like, I've always kind of had a special interest about law stuff. Like, I would never want to be a lawyer because it sounds awful, but like, there's I mean, just like, I don't know, it's just how my brain works. I like fucking like listing out all of the arbitrary rules of complicated systems and all of the like quaint origin stories behind them and stuff. It's just kind of a thing that my brain likes, you know. Um and fucking that's probably like why I was thinking about talking electoral college, in addition to just like not liking it and not wanting it to exist. I As far as why it's a bigger cultural thing, I mean, I kind of went into it just now, right? Like the whole thing of like how the power that stuff like this has to like get people not actually talking about the world and talking about like a bunch of made up like fucking rules and shit and decorum and like electors and whatever the fuck, and like not even really considering what they can do to like help people, because changing the world means running for office or voting or doing a protest or whatever, but like a peaceful protest. It has to be peaceful, don't forget. Like, you get the point. It's like very it's pacifying, and I think that's the intent. I mean, the idea is supposed to be that this way change can happen peacefully, and there's not like, you know, constant like kings fucking killing and eating each other to get more power. But it also kind of creates the problem where if the system is awful, then it's harder to do anything with it because everything fucking works within the system. So yeah, and yeah, I was kind of just going to interrogate like how I have that special interest about intricacies of American law, and like that kind of is weirdly power serving, and how that kind of like tricks you into just buying into all of the assumptions of like a state and an American state and like imperialism and all this shit. It just kind of tricks you into like buying into that without even noticing that you're doing it. There was also going to be some mention of like, you know, the whole idea of fucking back to normal, and like, you know, people who like me are like fucking Mr. Trump, you can't legally do that. It's actually a violation of the fuckboy clause of the Constitution. You can't. Sorry, that wasn't that funny. And it's like that's the vector that we get. That's like how we're told to change the world, and it sucks and it's not that useful. But we're not often really told a different method. We're not told anything else to do. It's just do this, you know, like fucking vote for Joe Biden. And then that was gonna somehow segue in a way I'm not totally sure about into this whole part where I was just gonna complain about the idea of faith in institutions. There was a video I was listening to about like fascism, and it was just specifically like citing, you know, one of the first signs of fascism is like the crumbling of faith in institutions. And that's just something that really bothers me, like that idea where it's like, you know, the problem is that people don't trust authorities anymore. It's like, because there's a reality to it where it's like, you know, a lot of shit is just like people not paying attention to others and not paying attention to the world around them, and getting like entirely just drowned in ideology to the point where they just fucking like literally will just, I mean, they just go all fucking 1984 or whatever, and they're all like whatever the thing is that the president says is the thing, or, you know, that whole shit. I think that's what it's trying to critique, like, because when a leader gets to have that kind of power, it's not good. But it was also like, it's not great as a model in general, because it's one of those things like populism, or it's like one of those things that is like very much kind of meant to describe a specific political side, but they try to kind of present it in this even-handed way, so that it's like, no, well, it's not necessarily, because you see when you think about it, communists and the fascists are the same thing, because, you know, the means by which fucking Lenin attempted to do communism are the only way that anyone can ever possibly conceive of doing communism, and so they're the same, and all of the bad things are the same thing, and they all happen when people don't trust the science, which is whatever I say it is. It's because that's the thing, like science. I mean, I fucking made a whole video about that shit, right? Science is good, science is useful, science isn't God. Like, not like in the sense that science isn't as good as God, but in the sense that science can't be treated like God. Like, we can't treat it like that. And I think that's the problem, is that people have been doing that, and so then that starts to crumple, and there's nothing to back it up, because there's science, and there's this idea of science as being like always right and always perfect and always and like fucking God. And then when people start being like, I'm just going to say that if I drink bleach, it will cure my cancer, there's like nothing you can do, because all people do in response to that is be like, but what about the science? Like they don't care. Like, it's not about the science. They think that the science is that drinking bleach cures cancer somehow. Like, it doesn't fucking like saying like, but the science is basically the equivalent of if someone was like, I'm a Buddhist, and you're like, but what about God? Like, it doesn't mean anything. You believe two different things now, and you're just believing in them. You're not like engaging in an actual dialogue there. And so that was the whole frustration I was trying to get out in that video. And this was going to go into that, and it was also going to go into some stuff about like fucking how I was feeding into that with the electoral college stuff, and stuff about like acceptable kinds of protests, and blah 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 blah, and how acceptable protest isn't very pragmatic, and there was some other stuff. I don't know. I didn't get that far in writing this section. It was probably the most expendable section that I could probably just cut. But I think it was a pretty good idea to have. All things considered. Anyway, after that, I was just gonna have a whole part called "To Vote or Not to Vote," where I talk about voting, which is probably the most relevant part of this in terms of like putting it out right before election day, which is why I've done a very clever thing and released it 36 minutes into the recording. I think that was a pretty epic play on my part. um I mean, I'm not even doing like a cheeky bit here. I just didn't think of this until just now. Hopefully people watch this. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I was just gonna talk about fucking, should you vote for the lesser of two evils? Should you vote for Joe Biden? Should you vote for a party? Should you vote like for Donald Trump? That's what it sounds like. I wrote a whole thread about this on Twitter earlier today, and was just like, the idea to me is that, vote for whoever you want, do whatever you think is going to be the most effective. I just think that, like, in keeping with the theme of what I was talking about before, when we vote, we need to keep in mind what we're actually trying to accomplish by voting, and we need to keep in mind, like, what our end goal is at the end of it all. It's not just this kind of, like, abstract obligation. It's like, if you're a communist, like I am, you should think to yourself, like, will me voting be a good idea in that light, right? Like, and you should think about other stuff in that sense too. Voting is just such a cost-free activity for me personally, at least, that as long as voting for a candidate doesn't hurt, then I just do it, because like at worst it's the same as the alternative, and at best it's better. So what's that's at least my opinion on it. But like, if you can't do that, it's fine. I'm not really gonna shame people about it, and I don't think there's really a use in doing that, because I think voting is it's a tiny thing you can do, and it's fine. It's just like, I already filled in my ballot, I voted for Joe Biden, I did the whole thing. And yeah, if it's, I blanked out. ADHD makes you just blank out sometimes. As I was saying, I wasn't really enthusiastic about it. I wasn't losing my mind over it. And like, other people might do something different, and that's fine too. I just felt it was like a very easy thing to do for me, you know? It took like an hour, and then I sent it out, and that was it. So, you know, it's not taking away time from other stuff is the most important thing, because the idea of opportunity cost is really the more important thing to consider when it comes to like establishment political action. Because going to a protest can be a good idea. Going to, fucking campaign for a candidate, I guess, could be a good idea sometimes. But, like, the thing you have to keep in mind is, like, what are you actually trying to accomplish in the end? I don't think harm reduction is a good enough reason to, like, do a bunch of campaigning when instead of campaigning, what you could do is you could, like, you know, you could start building mutual aid, for example. You could try and, like, work with mutual aid networks in your area to kind of, create resilience in case something bad happens, which is much more of an immediate way to like do harm reduction than fucking campaigning for Joseph Gordon Biden. Like it's not. It's way better to like try to actually reduce harm physically, like in the real world, than it is to like, oh, I'm going to try and convince people to vote for a candidate that no one likes. That's harm reduction to me. Like, it is harm reduction, but it's not as effective. And I think that's the thing. And I think if you're a communist like me and you don't like, and you believe like me that you can't get rid of a fucking state by voting, you can't use the state to get rid of a state. They don't really do that. It's like if you were trying to destroy a gun, so you bought a gun so that you could shoot it with the gun. It's like, okay, but now you just have a gun again. I don't know. That's not a great metaphor. Whatever. Look, the point is that states aren't very good at destroying themselves. When you operate in a state, you become the kind of person who believes that they need to be in a position of power, and that there needs to be a state, and that there needs to be a system and a process and all this shit. I'm not going to get into the whole fucking theory of it. You can read something. Really, my thread earlier today kind of covered a lot of this stuff, so I should probably just link that. Yeah, basically it was just like voting fucking is easy, and like do it if you think it's a good idea. But like there's more fucking what are you gonna do the rest of the time? Are you gonna campaign for people? No. That's a bad idea. It's a waste of time. I think at least that it's a much better use of time to do more radical political activism, to start unions, to fucking start mutual aid networks, that kind of thing. You understand, hopefully, what I mean. This is incredibly rambly, so I'm just going to have to force my brain to move on to the same topic. Basically, I was just going to have as a concluding bit, what is to be done? It's a quote from so, yeah, basically I was going to say, like, all of the things I just said about, like, you should build networks of mutual aid. You should build horizontal activism groups. You should make sure that your activism, the means of your activism, reflect the ends. So if you want to create an anarchist society, then your activism needs to be anarchist. It needs to be without hierarchy in its means, or else the ends will not be without hierarchy. And that's a whole fucking thing. I'm not getting into that either, because that's a whole extra thing that I probably would have gone more into if I actually finished this. But I'm really just like stretching how long I can ramble for. And an important part of what I was going to say was just that, like, I'm not the fucking girl genius over here. I'm not like I'm not some great thinker, My video doesn't count as theory. It's not like fucking all I can do is kind of spitball at like stuff that you could do, or stuff that might be a good idea, or stuff that you think maybe you might want to think about, or whatever. That's all I can do. I can't really give people much more than that. And I'm just some person. What you need to do is going to be different for you, and like that's fine. Yeah. That was all it was. This was a video that was going to be kind of long, but I didn't have a lot of things to fill the length with, but I probably would have if I got to writing. Because this is one of those topics where, like, if I start talking about it, I will either, like, cut myself off before I feel like I've finished saying everything I want to say, or I will never, ever stop talking. So, yeah, I don't know. It's complicated. Hopefully things will go well in the future and I will be able to make other videos about other stuff and maybe even finish this video if I feel like it, you know. We'll just have to see, I guess. For the time being, though, I mean, you know, looking forward to the election. Can't wait to see how that unfolds. By which I mean, I'm probably going to just turn off everything, including the internet, and play Pokemon for the entire night. Because honestly, I just don't even fucking want to think about it for like one day. But I might not do that. Honestly, I might just like have my eyes glued to it the entire time. God knows. It's certainly going to be an interesting night for everyone, and I hope everyone stays safe out there. I hope everyone can maintain a certain sense of hope no matter what happens. Sometimes I have trouble holding on to hope, but I can hope that we all will, I guess. Whatever happens, I think that we have to try to hold on to some level of optimism just for the sake of staying people and functioning at least a little bit. You know, you have to be like me where I, you know, didn't think I was going to be able to get this video out before the election. And then I just decided, fuck it, I'll just ramble about what I was going to say in it. And at least then something will happen. You know, and I guess that's what we have to do sometimes. Whatever that means. This is what I'm talking about. It gets very incoherent if I ramble for too long. And we're reaching that point. So, I mean, you know, if you enjoyed watching me do that, I guess you can watch other videos that I made that aren't like this. And hopefully won't be like this again. Or at least less like this. I don't have a lot of time to edit this either, so I have no idea how much of the guff I'm leaving in. Also, I will go at, since the video is probably pretty long, I'll just fucking look up patrons right now and read them out because, well, you get the idea. It's something that's important to do. Let's see. So, Mahan Harisaz, Honesty Archon, Julia Sudo, Vixen V. Vitch, Abigail Nail, Mizaki Damazan, Sonja Marie, Upscale Furry Trash, Niels a Build Guard, Bran, and Gender Thief. So, yeah, you know, patrons, thank you to those patrons. I am sorry I haven't made much lately. It's been a whole thing, you know how it is. Hopefully I will be more productive in the future. My job is better recently. I have other things that are also better recently that I'm not going to specify because they don't exist, and I just felt like I needed to say something else after that. This is quickly becoming unfunny. I feel like there's something else I'm supposed to do with this part, but I don't think there really is. I'm pretty sure that's just it. So give the video a like and subscribe if you liked it. And also watch other stuff I made. And also, if I ever fucking stream again, you could watch that. Those might be fun. I don't know. I'm so tired, guys. I'll just go to bed, and then tomorrow we'll just see what happens, okay? And I'll appreciate your support forever and ever. I'm also just literally tired because I had the idea to record this at like 10 p.m. So by the time I'm actually finishing, it's like noon. So I'm gonna hit not record anymore button. See ya. Bye.